Okay, welcome everyone to our third lesson in the writing part of our course. We're still talking about task one, and in this lesson, we're going to describe a process and a map because you might get a question about describing the process of doing something. It's probably maybe scientific or technical, and you can describe changes in a map, maybe between 10 years ago and now, a map of a city or a town and so on. So let's begin our lesson with how to describe or talk about a process. For task one, you might be asked to describe a process such as how things is made or something that happens in nature. You're given a diagram and there may be one or two unfamiliar words. You shouldn't be thinking about that anyway, but a definition may be given below the diagram. May, but not always. Study each stage of the process to work out what is happening and keep the tone quite formal as you would do in any other task one questions. Okay, so let's see an example. Okay, as you can see, the diagram shows the process of making string hoppers, a kind of noodle. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparison or comparisons where necessary. As you can see, there are 6 stages, and at first you might feel confused about the whole thing. Okay, I won't lie to you, it's not easy. It takes practice. You need to study the process first before you do anything. So that's why we have maybe 5 questions for homework. I mean, for today's lesson. Okay, so let's begin our lesson by describing the equipment. If you go back to the process, here we have a grinder. Okay, and here we have some sort of a piece of equipment. Okay, so let's describe these devices. First of all, we have a string hopper press. Okay, the process itself, it begins with grinding rice and ends with noodles, this kind of noodle, string hopper. Okay, this is called string hopper press because it presses the dough to make the string hopper noodle. Okay, it's made of heavy metal and has 2 parts which are similar in shape. These 2 parts are similar in shape. The center is found and there are handles on each side. One part fits into the other. Okay, I'm sorry, the center is round, not found. I'm sorry. The center is round, as you can see, and one part fits into the other. And there are handles on both sides. Now we have something called string hopper mats. These are round, shallow baskets made of thin pieces of wood. The wood is in a pattern to form large holes. Okay, and here we have the rice grinder. It's a machine made of metal with a wide tray at the top and a narrower base. Before we start our lesson, I want to tell you something that at times you might get a question that you cannot even, you don't even know how to start doing the question. If that happens, I want you to move on to part 2 of the writing test, to the essay. Spend 40 minutes on the essay, then come back to the question and try to do your best. We will talk about that later, inshallah. Okay, now before you start writing anything, you have to describe the process in simple sentences. At the exam, you won't have time. You have to do all these steps: the introduction, the overview, the main body of the short essay or the report, and the conclusion in less than 20 minutes. For the preparation stage of writing this essay, you need to spend maximum 5 minutes max. Okay, so just try to find some simple sentences just to tell yourself at the exam. For example, the first one: put the rice into the grinder and grind into flour. Okay, then add water to the flour, mix well to form a dough. Okay, push through the string hopper press into the string hopper mats, okay, to make the noodles. Then cook in a steamer, and then serve with maybe with spicy curries or something. Okay, so that's the process in simple sentences. This shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. Okay, now we have to talk about the passive. You need to use the passive while writing such a short essay. Okay, so let's complete some sentences about T using the present simple passive, because we don't really care who does what. Okay, we are talking about the process. We don't care if Michael or Muhammad or anyone does something. Okay, we are talking about the process. So if we are talking maybe about the process of manufacturing or producing tea products, we could say tea leaves are picked by hand. We don't say you pick the tea leaves by hand. We don't say that. Only the best leaves are used. It's the present simple passive, of course. A lot of water is needed to grow tea plants successfully. So is needed is the passive too. A lot of tea is grown in China and India. We don't say China and India grow a lot of tea. Okay, we don't say that. So we have to use the present simple passive with the to describe the process. I mean, okay. Okay. Also, we have to use sequencing words. We talked about this many times before, because these are steps and you have to follow the steps carefully, right? So you will be using first, then second, third, or you could use first, after that, then the next stage, then finally. Okay, so first, the rice is put through a grinder. So this is the sentence. There are two things that you need to notice about this sentence. It uses the sequencing word first, and it also uses the passive, the present simple passive. Okay. After that, you could say second or secondly, it doesn't really matter. Water is added to the flour, then it's mixed and made into a dough. Okay. As you can see, these will help you with coherence and cohesion, and we're going to talk about that later on in the session. The next stage, which is of course after the third one, so it's the fourth stage, is to push the dough through the string hopper press. Then the string hoppers are placed in a steamer. Finally, which means the final step, of course, finally they are served with spicy curries. Okay, so these are the steps. As you can see, things are getting easier now. Okay, but you need more information to write the short essay. Okay, because this is a short essay. You need to, for each step, you will need maybe 2 or 3 sentences, but not for all steps though. Sometimes one step could have maybe 4 sentences and another step could have only 1 sentence. Okay, so writing task 1, your answer should include an introduction and an overview. Let's talk about that first. The introduction is usually the task question rewritten in your own words using paraphrasing. Of course, we said that you shouldn't be using the same exact words. Okay, the overview is a summary of the process. So let's talk about that. The diagram demonstrates, shows, illustrates. You can use one of these verbs. Actually, there are more verbs than that. The process of preparing string hoppers, a kind of noodle. So this is your introduction. It's the words in the question paraphrased. Okay, this is the introduction. The diagram shows, demonstrates, illustrates what the process of preparing string hoppers, which is a kind of noodle. Okay. There are 6 stages in the process, beginning with grinding the rice and making a dough and ending with using a steamer to cook the string hoppers. This is the overview is a summary of the whole thing. Okay, it's a summary of the whole process. We say that there are 6 stages in this process, and it begins with grinding the rice and making a dough. Okay, so you just maybe summarize the first 3 steps in just part of a sentence. Okay, and ending with using a steamer to cook the string hoppers. Okay, because this ends the actual process. The final one is serving the meal or the dish. Okay, so the first thing that you need to start with when you are describing a process, always you need to start with the conclusion, then the overview. Sometimes the overview can be the conclusion, but we will talk about that later. Okay, just follow my lead and start with the introduction, then the overview. This is how it's done. Okay. These are some good overviews. Okay, we said that we have an introduction, then an overview. For example, if you are describing maybe the process of making an omelette, okay, to make a perfect omelette, you need fresh ingredients, the right equipment, and the correct technique. You must also cook it for the correct amount of time and pay attention to the temperature. Okay. Maybe you are talking about the process of producing tea. Okay, you could have an overview like the production of tea involves a range of stages, from picking the leaves from the plant to drying and distributing it. Okay, so it summarizes the whole thing. Okay, maybe you are talking about making strawberry jam, which is my favorite, by the way. There are a number of processes involved in making strawberry jam, from picking the fruit from the tree to putting it into jars ready to sell. Okay, so these are some examples of an overview. Okay. After writing the introduction and the overview, you should start describing the process using sequencing words and the passive. Describe the equipment and end your short essay with a conclusion. So you will not be talking about the 6 steps only. Sometimes you need to describe the equipment. Okay, maybe you'll describe the string hopper mat, or the press, the string hopper press. Of course, the rice grinder is known to everybody, almost everybody. So I wouldn't be describing this one. Okay. Now let's look at an example. Okay, the diagram illustrates, illustrates the process of preparing string hoppers, a kind of noodle. So this is the introduction, just the words of the question paraphrased. Don't avoid using the same words as the question, you will lose marks. There are 6 stages in the process, beginning with grinding the rice and making a dough, and ending with using a steamer to cook the string hoppers. This is an overview. It summarizes the whole thing. Okay. First, the dry rice is put into a rice grinder to make it into flour. So this is the first step. We used a sequencing word first, the sequencing word first. Then we used next. You could say second or secondly. Okay, it doesn't really matter. The flour is mixed with water and formed into dough. Okay, this word can be countable and uncountable. Anyway, so I'm describing the second process. Okay, and the third one in one sentence. Okay, sometimes you can, as I told you earlier, you can use just maybe 4 or 5 sentences to talk about one, maybe a complicated process or step. Okay, but for this, to mix water with rice to make a dough, it's very easy. So it could be just written in one word. After that, the dough is put into a string hopper press, which is a metal piece of equipment with 2 handles and holes in it. So this is a relative clause. It defines or describes what is a string hopper press. Okay. So we started here for the fourth step. I'm sorry. After that, the dough is put into a string hopper press, which is a metal piece of equipment with two handles and holes in it. The dough is pushed through the holes and it comes out as thin noodles. We are still describing the fourth step in the process. You push the dough, not the rice, actually the dough, um, through the holes, okay, and it comes out as thin noodles. The noodles are placed into individual string hopper mats. This is called a string hopper mat, which are round baskets made of thin pieces of wood. They are cooked. Now I'm describing the fifth step in the process. Okay, so we used maybe 1, 2. Okay, we used 2 sentences. 1, 2. Yes, 3 sentences to describe the fourth step. Okay, after that, this is the first sentence. The dough is pushed through the holes. Second sentence. The noodles are placed into individual string hopper mats. This is the third sentence. Okay. They are cooked in a steamer until they are ready. So just one sentence, one simple sentence to describe this step. The final stage is to serve the string hoppers with a variety of spicy curries. This is the final stage, final step. You could say the final step is, you could say the final stage is, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so we have used in the main body of this short essay, we've used the sequencing words first, next, after that. Okay, you could use even then they are cooked in a steamer until they are ready for the fifth step. Then you end your short essay with the conclusion. This completes the process that starts with rice and ends with string hoppers. Okay, so this is your conclusion. You have the introduction, the overview, and the main body, which describes the steps using sequencing words and the passive voice. Okay, and you end your paragraph, or I'm sorry, your short essay with the conclusion. Okay. Important. Study the diagram carefully. You have 5 minutes to do all that. Okay, you have to study the diagram carefully. Although the task is not testing your knowledge on the subject, your interpretations of the diagram needs to be accurate. Okay, your interpretation of the diagram needs to be accurate. You need to understand the process. Write a brief plan and include vocabulary. I like to just write maybe simple notes. Okay, I will have an introduction, then an overview, then I will describe the stages. In the stages, I could just write one: put rice grinder, mix rice with and water, form dough. Okay, put dough into sh, which is string hopper. Okay, press. String hopper dough pushed comes thin. I'm using just keywords. Okay, you can use whatever you want, but you have to do this very fast. Cook, sh, which stands for string hopper. Steamer, in a steamer, of course. Serve, sh, with curry, and so on. Sometimes you may not understand every word expression in the process, but you have to make the best out of what you have. Okay, even if you don't understand the whole process, do your best. This is very important. If the task seems very difficult to you, move on to part 2 of the writing test, because it's worth more marks, and then come back again when you're done with the part 2. Okay, sometime I was told by a test taker about a year ago. He spent 40 minutes on task 1, and he got he didn't have any time for task 2, so he got maybe 5 or 4.5. I'm not sure. Don't make the same mistake. Spend as much time as possible on writing your essay. Okay, then you can start writing the Task 1. Describing the process could be one of the most difficult questions. Actually, it's the most difficult question in task 1. We will talk about maps. Maps are not that difficult, and of course, we talked about charts and line graphs and so on. They are not as difficult as describing a process. Okay. These are some simple vocabulary, simple words and expressions you can use. The diagram, or maybe the flow chart, illustrates, shows, demonstrates, and there are other verbs that we'll be talking about later on. Each picture represents a stage in the process of. Each picture represents a stage in the process of something. There are maybe 6, 7, 8, 4, 5 stages to this process, beginning with maybe you'll just an expression about a summary of the first step, and ending in maybe you'll talk about the last step in the process. In conclusion, to conclude, overall, this simple process shows how, of course, if you used shows in the introduction, you can't use the same verb in the conclusion. Try to avoid repetition. This is very important. Don't repeat yourself. Okay, don't use the same expression again and again. Okay. Now this is another process. This diagram shows how a newsroom works. It's about newsroom. Okay. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparison where necessary. As you can see, sometimes it's like a process, a never-ending process. Okay. And sometimes you will get lost. Which step should I begin with, right? Attending an event, face-to-face or phone interviews, TV cameras, crew. I'm lost, right? We're lost, right? It takes practice. You have to practice writing and looking at processes, and you need to spend some time reading them. Okay, it's a skill. It comes with practice, of course. Let's move on to the following slide. Okay, this is the plan. First, you will have your introduction, your overview, then main body. You will be explaining the steps in the main body, and you have your conclusion. I will use first, secondly, after that, finally, and I will use the passive as we said. Okay, you will start with your introduction, then your overview, right? But you have to just locate or find the first step. It's about how news are created in the newsroom. Okay, so attending, no, this will not be the first one. TV camera crews are assigned to jobs, no. Raw visual footage is reviewed and edited, no. It comes later in the process, right? You have first to have news in order to be edited, right? Sub editors will check stories for readability, no. Through press releases, journalists, or the general public. This seems that you get news through press releases, journalists, or even the general public. You can get news from them. Okay, so these are the steps. It begins with getting the news first. You have to use your mind. Okay, I have to get the news so I can enter the process. Okay, so we will start with this diagram. Illustrates how news stories are created in a newsroom. Overall, there are 5 steps, and the process involves many people, from journalists to photographers. Okay, so this is your introduction and your overview. You will start your process with, of course, the first process. First, news stories come into the newsroom through either journalists, press releases, or members of the general public. You should avoid using the same expressions and words from the question, because this process is your question, right? But for this, sometimes in the exam, you are just, of course, you'll be a bit anxious and worried, okay, it's the IELTS exam, you can use some of them. If you can't find or figure out an alternative, a synonym, if you can't find out a paraphrase, then use it. What else could you do? Okay, or can you do? So first, news stories come into the newsroom through either good journalists, press releases, or members of the general public. Okay, members of the general public. Secondly, so I will be talking about this step because here how it goes. Okay, journalists are assigned to different stories. It says attending an event, face-to-face or phone interviews, looking through archives. Secondly, journalists are assigned to different stories. This may mean that they have to attend an event, conduct interviews, or search archives. We said we shouldn't use the same exact words as in the process itself, as in the question, right? So we, of course, when we get the news through maybe press releases, journalists, or even people, okay, common people, journalists are assigned to different stories. This may mean that they have to attend an event, conduct interviews, or search archives. Here, face-to-face or phone interviews, attending an event. We said attend an event. Here it says attending, so we changed it a bit from a noun to a verb. Okay, this is good. It's considered paraphrasing. Conducting, we don't see this word here. Interviews or search archives. Looking through archives, it means searching archives. So this is a paraphrase. Thirdly, images become involved in the process. This could be through television crews, graphic designers, or photographers. After that, okay, now TV cameras crews are assigned to jobs, photo shoots are booked, or graphic designers are allocated work. So we said here images, because here it says photos or photo, okay, becomes involved in the process. This could be through television crews, graphic designers, or photographers. The thing here is that you have to understand the process itself. You need to spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes trying to study the process. Your purpose at first is not writing the short essay. Your purpose is to understand, because if you don't understand, you can't write anything. Okay. After that, depending on the type of newsroom, visual footage is reviewed or photographs are loaded into a computer. Raw visual footage is reviewed and edited. Photographs are loaded into a computer and saved. Journalists spend time finishing their stories. Actually, this process has maybe 2 things, not 1. After that, depending on the type of newsroom, visual footage is reviewed or photographs are loaded into a computer, because the newsroom could be using a computer or not. So it all depends on the type of newsroom. Okay. Journalists also have time at this point to finish their stories. Now they have time to finish their stories. Finally, this one, sub-editors are used to check that stories are legally and factually correct. This is a paraphrasing, okay? This is paraphrasing. Also, at this stage, some stories may be cut due to space or time restrictions. This completes the steps for how a newsroom operates. Not works, because we used work before, okay? I think we used work before, maybe in the question, but we just used operates, not works. Okay. How to describe a map? Let's talk about maps. Now we have the question. This is a question of Sunny held University in 1995 and today. So you will make comparison between 1995's Sunny Hill University, and now. Look at the two maps of Sunny Hills University campus in 1995 and today. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. You should write at least 150 words. It's for all task one reports and short essays. You have to write 150 words. Okay. As we said with the process, you have to study the map carefully. If you don't study the map, then it doesn't matter if your English is good, you will not be able to write the report or the short essay, if we can call it that. We have to study the map first. Let's talk about some facts regarding Sunny Hill University of today. Not in 1995. Let's start with the university today. As you can see, this is the map. Here we have some trees. Here we have a knife and a cup of coffee. So it's maybe a restaurant, some place to eat. Here we have a pond. It wasn't here. Okay, so there are some changes. Usually you will report what changed and what remained the same. And we are going to talk about that later on. Okay. But as you can see, most of these places have changed drastically. These are 8 facts about the university today. The founders building is between Watson building and the Scott Library. Okay, where's this founders building? It's here. Okay, the founders building is between. I want you to notice the use of the prepositions too. Watson building and the Scott Library. So this is the first fact. The bus stop is in the upper right-hand corner of the campus. Yes, this is the bus stop. There are 2 places to eat on the campus. Yes, there are 2 places to eat on the campus. One as part of the founders building, it seems so, and one here, okay, opposite to the laboratories. Anyway, the halls of residence are on the left side of the campus. Here's the halls of residence. Here are the halls of residence, okay. The laboratories are opposite the founders building. The laboratories are opposite the founders building. The bus stop is in the top right-hand corner. Okay, this is the bus stop. Okay, we talked about this before, I'm sorry. The recreation area is next to the laboratories. This is these are the laboratories, and the creation area, this one, is next to the laboratories. The table tennis tables are next to Scott Library. These are the table tennis tables. Of course, the table tennis, this is it's like a compound noun, okay, but it acts as an adjective to tables. It's not just any tables, it's for tennis table, table tennis, okay. Now let's talk about the facts regarding what used to be in the past, in 1995, about the Sunny Hills University. The tennis courts were next to the football pitch. These are the tennis courts. The founders building was in the middle of the campus. This is the founder building in the past. Okay, so when you talk about changes, you might use the past simple tense, or sometimes the present perfect tense, as we are going to see later on in the lesson, inshallah. Okay, but if something changed from the past, when you describe the past, use the past simple tense. Okay. The Scott Library was between the halls of residence and the football pitch. Okay, this is the Scott Library. It's between halls of residence and the football pitch. Okay. The cafe was opposite the football pitch. Okay, that's the cafe. There were 2 car parks on the campus. one and two, but now we have just one. Okay, so something else was replaced the car park too. The gym was in the bottom right hand corner of the campus. So this was the gym. Now it's placed with the pond, right? With the pond. The Watson building was to the left of the founders building. Where's the founders building? Yes, that's Watson building. As you can see, there was a main reception as part of the Watson building. Okay, but things have changed. Now we have Watson building and there's no reception, right? The main reception was moved to the upper left corner of the campus. Okay. The main reception was part of the Watson building. Okay, good. As you can see, studying the map will make things much easier for you to write the report. Okay. Now we know what happened. Also, you can write many other sentences. As you can see, there were some trees in this area. Okay. Now it was replaced with the bus stop, the students' union, and squash courts and the gym. Okay. The Scott Library was demolished, and actually no, the cafe and the car park too. They were replaced with the Scott Library, which were the library was here, okay, opposite to the halls of residence. So as you can see, there are many changes between Sunny Hill and Sunny Hills University 1995 and today, and the university today. Let's see how we can write these changes in the report. But you need to understand that for writing changes, writing about changes in a map, you need to use the active and the passive voices. We could see the campus was expanded. Trees were planted in the recreation area. The bus stop was moved. A new main reception was built. I don't really care who built what, right? I'm talking about the changes, not the people who made that possible. So you will mostly use the passive voice, but sometimes you need to use the active voice, as we are going to see in a minute. This is the report. The maps show changes to the campus of Sunny Hills University between 1995 and today. We can see that the university made many changes during this period, including new buildings and recreation. So this sentence is not passive, it's in the active voice. In the past, the Scott Library was in front of the founders building. By the way, before we continue, I just want to tell you that you will not be able to write about every little detail that happened in the university or campus. You will need to talk about the most important things. Okay, if something trivial happened, I will not be talking about it. I will not be reporting it. Okay, so let's continue. In the past, the Scott Library was in front of the founders building. The Scott Library was in front of the founders building. Yes, that was in 1995. It was relocated to the right, and in addition, it increased in size. So now it was relocated to the right. Okay, Scott Library, and it was increased in size. The old library building now contains laboratories, and this building now contains laboratories. In 1995, there was a car park in the top right-hand corner of the campus, whereas now the main reception is there. So there was a car park, okay, in the top left-hand corner of the campus. Now it's replaced with the main, the main reception is in place of the old car park one. Okay. Um, the halls of residence were moved to the far left of the campus, and a new arts building was built opposite them. Okay. So the halls of residence were moved to the far left of the campus. Here we have the halls of residence. Yes, they were moved in the passive voice, remember. They were moved to the far left of the campus, and a new arts building was built opposite them. I could say in place of the old building of the whole, in place of the old halls of residence buildings or something. Okay, you could just use something different than mine, of course. The old sports ground. Where's the old sports ground? Maybe these buildings, or they are not buildings, they are courts. Gym and tennis courts were demolished. However, in their place, the university created a new recreation area, this one, okay, with a pond, trees, and seating areas. Okay, so these are seating areas. As you can see, there are chairs and tables. Okay, so they demolished the football pitch, the tennis courts, and the gym. In place of them, they created a pond, a recreation area, okay, with a pond and some trees and seating areas. What's more, which means in addition, the university developed new sports facilities, including table tennis tables, a new gym, and squash courts. They also built two new cafes. Okay, here you have table tennis tables, squash courts, and the gym. So it's clear that the university changed and expanded during this period. Actually, your report could be much different than mine. It could be very different. Okay. It could be talking about something different. There are many changes. Here you have two maybe restaurants. Okay. Now, I mean, yes, in the past, actually, it says cafe. Here you have two. Now you have two, and there were only there was only one. Okay, one cafe in the past in 1995. We said that the main reception was part of Watson building. Now the main reception has been moved. Okay, but I would say moved, not has been moved. I would use the past simple, not the present perfect. Okay, let's analyze the map for a bit. Okay, we started with the introduction, the introductory sentence. It's a description of what the data shows. The maps show changes to the campus of Sunny Health University between 1995 and today. We can see that the university made many changes during this period, including new buildings and recreation. It's an overview. The overview is a summary of the main points. Then you have your main body describing the changes. This is your main body. It's just two paragraphs. We have verbs that we use to describe change. Okay, was relocated, increased, were moved, was built, were demolished, created, built, developed. Use these verbs to describe changes. And we have expressions describing where things are. Like these bolded expressions, in front of, something was in front of something else. To the right, it was relocated to the right. In the top left-hand corner, so we have many expressions describing where things are. We said in front of, to the right, in the top left-hand corner, to the far left, opposite them. Okay, these are expressions that you can use to describe where things are. And we talked about verbs describing change. This is very important. You have to describe or report the changes between the past and now. Then we ended our report with the conclusion, which is the overview written using different words and expressions. So it's clear that the university changed and expanded during this period. Okay, so this is the first map. Now let's look at another question, another map question. Here we have the same thing now and 20 years ago. And we have 16 things that we need to discuss first. Number one is the stadium. Okay, as we said, we have to study the map carefully. And you need to do this in less than 5 minutes. Two, we have the windmill. Then we have these buildings. Three is the skyscraper. Four is residential area. Then motorway. Of course, it's a British word. 6 is the east, of course. 7 is north. 8 here in the second map. Fields. Then 9 hills. 10 is the bridge. Then, and we have a river. Number 12, this is a farm. 13, this is a pond. 14, of course, as you can see, there is a cross, so it's a church. 15 is the west, and 16 is the south. So you have to study the map. What changed? Let's do that. The changes. Let's talk about the changes first. Between the past and now. As you can see now, we have more houses. More houses have been built. I'm using the present perfect simple, but in the passive voice, because I don't really care who built the houses. Okay, so the first change, we have more houses have been built, and a motorway has been built through the center of the island. Of course, this is an island, as you can see. It's surrounded by water. 3, a hospital has been built at the east of the island. Okay, we have a hospital here at the east. The residential area has increased in size. There was a residential area in the past, but it's increased in size now. A skyscraper has been built in the south of the island along with other buildings. Of course, in this area, there was nothing at all. Now we have some buildings and a skyscraper. And there are something that haven't changed. There are some things that haven't changed. The farms and the fields have remained the same, as you can see in the middle of the map. The church and the pond near the residential area have not changed. It's the same. Only the residential area has increased in size. Okay, so these are the changes that you need to report. The changes, what changed and what remained the same. This is what you are going to report. This is how you are going to build your report. Let's look at this. Looking at the two maps, it's evident that this island changed drastically in the last 20 years. Okay, now for this exercise, we have some mistakes. We have 5 spelling mistakes and 5 grammatical mistakes related to tenses use. Okay, so let's look at the report and try to find the mistakes, the tenses use and the spelling mistakes. Of course, this is our first mistake. It's island, not Ireland. This is the first one. Dramatically, it's spelled with 2 L's, not 1. So this is the second mistake. In the last 20 years, there has been a great deal of development in the south of the island. A motorway has been building. Of course, this is a grammatical mistake. Okay, And we have here another grammatical mistake. We should say this island has changed, not changed. I'm not talking about the past, because the present perfect simple has to do with something that happened before the present time, which has an effect in the present time, because these changes um, are here right now. Okay, so the first one should be has changed dramatically, okay, in the last 20 years. I should use the present perfect simple, not the past simple tense. Okay, then we have there has been a great deal of development in the south of the island. A motorway has been building? No, has been built, not building. This is the passive voice of the present perfect simple tense. Through, it's through. It's through, okay? Not through, through, okay? The center, because this is actually through the center of the island. This divides the existing farm from the newly built hotel, skyscraper, and increased residential area. The church and pond, however, still remain the same as they always were. There are new developments at the north end of the island. Behind the hills, there is a football stadium. Furthermore, in the east of the island, a large hospital has built. No, has been built. Has been built with space for car parking. Okay, this is the space for car parking. To the east of the hills are the windmill and bridge, features of the original island. Okay, these have not changes. These have not changed. I'm sorry. These have not changed. Overall, the island has been developed significantly. This is another spelling mistake. Over the last 20 years. This development was occurred. Oh, has occurred. Has occurred, okay. And the overall the island has been developed. No, has been developed, not has being developed. It says has being developed. No, it's a mistake. It's a grammatical mistake. It should say has been developed significantly over the last 20 years. This development was occurred. No, has occurred in both the south and the north of the island, providing more facilities for the people living there. For its inhabitants, it could be better. So now, as you can see, we have the introduction, we have the overview, we have the main body of the report. Okay. So this exercise has to do with grammatical accuracy. The more mistakes you do, the less marks you get. So the more marks you lose. Okay. So you have to watch for grammatical mistakes. Okay. Moving on to the following slide. Two other aspects you must take into consideration in the exam are coherence and cohesion. Coherence is about, is it easy to understand? Your report, is it easy to understand? Are your ideas organized in a logical way? And cohesion is more about, are your ideas connected together well, using, of course, cohesive devices, which are words that we use, words and expressions actually, to connect even parts of our sentence and between sentences and even between paragraphs. It's how we can connect our ideas. Okay. Now let's look at another question about Mumbai now and before 1845. We have 10 sentences. Let's read them. These two maps show that since 1845, Mumbai has changed considerably. There are railway lines which run through the central area, as do many major roads. One feature which has remained the same, however, is the name given to the areas of Mumbai. In particular, it has many facilities such as hotels, cinemas, churches, and hospitals. There is also a harbor located to the east of Mazagon or Mazagon. Looking at the map of Mumbai today, we can see it's now a highly developed area with many facilities. Overall, therefore, these two maps clearly illustrate that this area has changed significantly since the 1800s. We have used the present perfect simple here too, in the passive voice. Furthermore, there are also several transport links which now connect this area together. Before 1845, Mumbai was made up of 7 different islands, as opposed to the one mainland which exists today. For example, the south part of the city is called Kolaba, after the original island, while the north part is called Worli and Parel, and the east part Mazagon or Mazagon. Okay, so as you can see, these 10 sentences are not organized. It will become very difficult to understand the report. Okay, so we need to understand how to order these sentences. The order of the sentences is not coherent or logical, so making the meaning difficult for the reader to understand. You need to put these sentences in a logical order by answering the following questions. Which sentences would you put in the introduction? Which sentences would you put in the first paragraph describing what has changed? Because as we said, we need to talk about what changed and what remained the same. This is how you write your report about the map, the changes in these two maps between the past and Mumbai now. So you need to talk about the changes and what did not change, what remained the same. And which sentences would you put in the summary at the end? So these like 4 categories: the introduction and the overview, then what changed or has changed, and what has remained the same, then the sentences that you would put at the end, the conclusion or the summary. Okay, so now let's look at the whole thing. This is the report organized. Okay, these two maps show that since 1845, Mumbai has changed considerably. Before 1845, Mumbai was made up of 7 different islands, as opposed to the one mainland which exists today. This is your introduction and your overview. Looking at the maps of Mumbai today, we can see it's now a highly developed area with many facilities. In particular, it has many facilities such as hotels, cinemas, churches, and hospitals. There are railway lines which run through the central area, as do many major roads. Furthermore, there are also several transport links which now connect this area together. There is also a harbor located to the east of Mazagon, or Mazagon, as we said. One feature which has remained the same, however, is the name. So the previous paragraph, this one, is about changes, what has changed. But there are some things that did not change, which can be written in this one paragraph here. One feature which has remained the same, however, is the names given to the areas of Mumbai. So the names have not changed. For example, the south part of the city is called Kolaba, after the original island, while the north part is called Worli and Parel, and the east part Mazagon. Overall, this is your conclusion. Overall, therefore, these two maps clearly illustrate that this area has changed significantly since the 1800s. So this is how you build your map question. You start with your introduction, then your overview. You write maybe one paragraph about the changes and one paragraph about what remained the same. Then you end your report with the conclusion. In order to make a text read well, you need to use cohesive devices. These are words or short phrases which help guide the reader through your writing by linking parts of the sentence or even connecting sentences and paragraphs. We talked about this before when we said first, do something, then do something else, third, do something. At this stage, the next stage, and finally. So these are connecting words. These are cohesive devices. Good use of these devices will make what you have written easy to follow. Without them, your writing may be difficult to read with too many short sentences. So in order to make compound and complex sentences, you need to use cohesive devices like and, but, or, however, although, whereas, while. All these are cohesive devices. Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. If you want to add an idea, you could say furthermore, also, moreover, in addition, what is more. To add a similar idea, you could use as do or similarly. If you want to highlight an idea, you can say in particular or particularly. If you want to contrast an idea, you could use whereas, in comparison, in contrast, and so on. If you want to add a summary, you could say in conclusion, to conclude, to summarize, overall, and so on. Don't overuse these words and expressions. Some people just try to use one of these words in front of each sentence, which is a big mistake. Your text will be illogical and it will not be easy to follow. So try to use them carefully. For our previous question, we have used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have used 9 cohesive devices. We could say 10. I'm sorry, we could say 8 because these are related to the in one sentence. So you could say we have used 8. Okay, as opposed to one mainland, the one mainland which exists today. In particular, it has many facilities such as then as do many major roads, because we are adding something similar. Okay, if you go back here, we are adding a similar idea, as do or similarly. Okay. Furthermore, however, here, for example, we are giving an example. So if you want to give an example of something, use for example, of course, followed by a comma. While, overall, therefore, and previously we've used whereas. Okay. This concludes our today's lesson. For your homework, you are going to write about 5 different task 1 questions. You will write about a map, about a process, and so on. Try to do each question in one day. Don't try to do them all in one day. Okay. See you soon, inshallah. Bye bye.